Welcome to the EQ4 Life Podcast. EQ4 Life is a podcast based on your views as a parent, a companion, an entrepreneur, or business leader, and how learning to be smart about emotions plays out in everyday life. And here's our host, a practitioner and teacher of emotional intelligence, Parrish Owen Taylor.
Okay, so are we still at Lake St. Louis Police Department?
Yep.
In Missouri? And
Yep.
Lieutenant Pat Doering, crisis negotiation. I'm excited about this podcast, Pat. We've associated through the National Tactical Officers Association.
Right.
You have, since our acquaintance, you have developed a course for crisis negotiation, right?
Me and a couple of other instructors. So we've been doing 40-hour courses in person, since negotiation started in like the 70s. But when COVID hit, we kind of branched out and said, hey, people still need to get training, right? So what are we going to do? So we kind of came up with let's try the online stuff. So that's kind of where we went, and we've developed a 40-hour online course. And it's kind of reached out to where we got internationals, we got people from all over the country attending. So it's kind of unique.
Fantastic. So let's go back a little bit. Let's do credentials and criteria, introductions of Pat Doering.
Sure.
And you triggered it right there, because last time we spoke, there was a time we didn't have any training on crisis negotiation. And,
right.
And I think through your career and your experience, you've been a key component of that. So take us back a little bit. Give me that high level of Pat Doering and your career in law enforcement.
Okay. Yeah. So I started in law enforcement in 1996. So it's almost 28 years now. So negotiation wise, kind of trying to find that niche in law enforcement. Everybody kind of tries to find what they're doing. So I remember early on, I went to a course, and it was like an intro course to barricaded subjects or something. So this guy came in. I knew nothing about negotiations whatsoever. He was from St. Louis County, which is right next to us. And just like the stories of, talking to people, negotiations, all the stuff he had, I was fixed on it. And he had a book. So I bought his book. So I had to read his book, and just started really getting into it. But it was one of those things to where you just kind of, you do it, and so back in the day, our sheriff's department was the only team in the county. So we had a county sheriff's department that kind of handled the barricades and whatnot. But then in 2005, all the chiefs got together and said, hey, we need to really expand the resources. Let's look at doing something different. So we put a countywide team together. So there's 6 agencies in our county, and everybody put in SWAT guys and negotiators. So I became one of the negotiators in 2005, and then just kind of started from there. And then I think 2014, I became a team leader. So we had 2 separate teams. So when our team would get called out, I'd kind of run that into the team. And then I think it was last year, I became the commander of the team. So I've been running the team for the last year, probably going into almost 2 years now. And, just the aspects of the training and, dealing with the call outs and just managing, the different personalities and stuff. So that's kind of my negotiation career. I've been lucky enough. I've got to go to a lot of pretty good trainings. Was able to go to the 2-week class in Quantico, which that's kind of their thing for FBI negotiators. They train their people in 2 weeks, and they invite some local officers. So like 6 or 7 local guys get to go every now and then. And then they actually have international students. So I had 2 guys from London, a guy from Australia, Belgium, and Germany in class. So that was kind of a unique situation. And the great thing about negotiations is, building that rapport and keeping the networking. So I networked those guys from London, and they invited me over to their 2-week course over in London, Scotland Yard for 2 weeks. So I got to do that. So there's not a lot of local guys that have gotten to do both those courses. So I think that's kind of something that's really benefited me. And just, it's funny though, when you sit down, no matter where you're from, as law enforcement, we all kind of have similar experiences and similar stuff we're dealing with. So I just kind of find that kind of interesting, no matter, especially when we get our international students in some of these classes, a lot of stuff they're dealing with, maybe they don't have the gun stuff like we do in America, but it's similar situations, I guess. So that's just kind of it. And I started training negotiators in like 2016, 2017. I got into the NTOA. I became the section chair for negotiations, and just kind of been doing it ever since. And, it's just one of those passions, and it's a great resource. And just going back on my initial stuff. So the guy I first met, Gino, he was kind of like my mentor. So I actually got to train with him, and then he kind of handed me over. He's like, "Hey, Pat, here's all my stuff. Go train." And it was just like one of those things like, man, that's awesome, because he trusted me enough that he was one of those guys, and he realized, hey, I'm kind of done now. It's on to you. So I think that's something we need to keep doing, is just keep bringing that training on. It doesn't do any good if you have all the knowledge and you don't pass it on, kind of a thing. So
yeah, I mean, you just said a lot right there, Pat. But that concept of you being able to interface, engage with others, especially other countries. I practice a lot of these human performance concepts that's in a playbook, and that's one of them. Taking our experiences and sharing them and learning from them, where the next generation, if you will, can benefit. So you're right on the money, man. I hope in this podcast in some way can help, bring awareness to, again, crisis negotiation. But my next little spin on where I want to go is, where do emotions play out on this? I'll just start there, man. I know we want to be intelligent.
Right.
Just talk about emotions.
It's a great walk-in, because the first thing we talk about when we teach negotiators is the only thing you can control in a negotiation are your own emotions. So if I don't even have control of my emotions, man, it's not going to be a good day. So that's the number one thing we teach is, man, you have to be able to control your own emotions. And you know what? That's not easy to do when everybody else around you's hair's on fire and people are screaming and running all around. You got to be that. Basically, we got to be that calming effect. When we show up, we got to be calm. We have to, even though we may not be inside, we still got to be reliant enough to, hey, you know what? This is a crazy situation, but the main thing is I have to control my own emotions. So, I mean, that just kind of segues into, negotiation 101. You got to be in control of your own emotions.
I've had the advantage of sitting with you in the past, and you gave me an example of how that could be challenging. Can you give me an example? I guess what you said to me at that time was, maybe you're in a situation with a child, you've got a child,
right? Yeah, it's a
so
lot of times. Yeah, you got to identify, I have to know what my hot buttons are. What's that thing that's going to push me over the edge? Is it that, man, I got an 8-year-old son. This guy's got his 8-year-old son. He's in there and not letting him go. That's gonna tick me off. But I got to be cognizant enough to realize, okay, I get that, but I still got to do my job. And it's almost like you gotta figure out that on your own. Like, okay, I know this incident alone is going to push my hot button, but I got to get through that. I think that's what we're really talking about when we're talking about that emotional intelligence.
I immediately see the world, after 30 years, right? You found your niche in crisis negotiation. I found mine through the lens of EQ. And I, like yourself, we try to teach it. So I got this MAP 5, just another way to teach it. But that third competency, man, that's what you just talked about. Stress tolerance, me knowing my stressors, me knowing my triggers, emotional stability, resilience, right? I mean, we opened up this podcast by talking about patience.
Right.
Patience falls under those emotional intelligence competencies. So let's go there for a minute. Is time on your side as a negotiator?
Well, see, that's a funny concept, because we always like to preach, time's on our side, but we have to really put that in perspective of, and I kind of have this phrase of time's on your side till it's not, right? So, and I don't want to use bad examples, but let's look at Uvalde. Uvalde, time was not on our side. We had kids dying, we had kids injured. That's when you have to realize, you know what? That's not the time to negotiate and do that. Time's not on our side, right? But there are instances where, okay, now let's look at something different. The guy's barricaded, he's by himself, there's nobody else to harm, he's isolated, we got him contained. Now we can slow this down and start negotiating, use time to basically, so I have a guy I work with, I love this phrase, he goes, time heals crisis, right? So a lot of time, if you just use that time, it's going to heal the crisis, right? Because if you think about it, when you're really mad at that incident, when it happens, right? Yeah. But then, an hour from now, 2 hours, 3 hours, it starts just kind of wearing down, right? And that's just the effects of time, right? So,
Good
but that's
point.
the one thing I really try and stress, because I hear it a lot. Well, time's on our side, time's on our side. Time is time, right?
Now
It's
this
just
is
how
good.
we use that time.
So I'm gonna pull from other occupations, other high hazard occupations that we deal with, and it's internal. Do you experience that as a negotiator, where there's an internal rush which goes into the emotional intelligence?
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
it's not anything external. We learn about situational awareness and our perception and our ability, but man, is there something where I would be aware inside, where maybe I'm pushing?
Oh yeah, yeah. And it just goes back to that realizing, oh man, I got to hurry up and get something going here. I got to hurry up and get this guy on the phone. And it's just sometimes just taking that time. You got to take that deep breath. Oh, let's take a deep breath. Let's get a little bit more information in. Maybe figure out really, okay, what do we really know? Because sometimes, like I said, you get there and everything's chaotic. Hey, we got to figure out what's going on, and it's just having that cognizant, awareness of, what, everybody's in a hurry, but sometimes it's good just to take that step back, take that 360-degree, kind of look and be like, hey, you know what? Let's just slow it down a little bit, get a little bit more information, then we can go. But yeah, I mean, like I said, when everybody's high stressed, you kind of get sucked up into that sometimes. And you got to basically be cognizant enough of, what? I got to slow it down, get more information before I rush into something. So, and a lot of it is just that experience of
Mhm.
doing it the wrong way, and then realizing, I remember last time I did that and it didn't work out really well. I need to fix that, kind of a thing. So,
Again, I'm the 5 second competency, which are the self. These are all within self, and that's me self monitoring and say, look, and we're saying it this way. Look, these are human factors.
right,
If we just blanket it under human factors, um, so you're going to get that feeling of getting rushed. That's a human factor. You're going to get
right,
distracted. You're going to get confused. But the action item is what you just said. You're aware of it. You stop. You get the breath, which I still to this day believe that a lot of people don't understand why the breathing. Why?
right. Yeah,
Um, and you reset to get that moment of calm or clarity of thinking. Right?
right. Yep, absolutely. Yeah,
When we talk about law enforcement, I mean, it is an emotionally roller coaster day. You're sitting waiting, perhaps, on the call,
right,
where next thing you get the death notice. You got to
right.
deliver the death
Yeah,
notice,
yeah,
and then I got to go to the kids' parade,
right.
right?
Yeah.
And then I get the siren alert. So, talk to me about the day in the life of a crisis negotiator.
Well, the first thing is no day is the same, right? So this just happened to us recently. So we have a system that basically tells us, hey, this is what's going on. So we get a notification, hey, we have a potential arrest warrant coming at 5 o'clock. The guy's wanted for a shooting, possibly could be a murder, depends on how the guy ends up finding out. We get the location, we got to go there, we got to start staging so everybody shows up 5 o'clock. We're getting the briefing. Hey, here's the guy we're looking for. We're suiting up, getting ready to get, hey, we got to try and get our profile on the guy, get phone numbers, all this stuff. We get an armored car, we're getting ready to roll out, and all of a sudden, oh wait, he's in custody. He already got caught. So you're like, oh wait, we did all this, and so that's the kind of stuff you go with, right? So sometimes you get way up, and then immediately it's just that poof, it's all over. We didn't even do anything today, right? And then sometimes it's the, hey, by the way, we just got this call. There's a guy, he just climbed this 50-foot tower. Now he's hanging on this tower. Go negotiate with them, right? So it's so many different things you're dealing with, from call to call. No call's the same. And like I said, you could be negotiating with a guy on a tower. We had a guy on top of a railroad car, and he was, you would think, oh, a railroad car, it's not high, but it was one of those ones you look up like, oh, that's pretty high. I mean, if he jumped off there, he could probably kill himself, kind of thing. So you just never know what the next call is going to be, right? So
Yeah, just thinking about the scenarios you're describing, right? So, again, you're eating lunch and you get the call, go, right? Um, or you're prepped, you're all gathered, and then you got to stand down. So
right.
the highs
Yep.
and the lows. Let's talk about it from a social. When you think about EQ or EI, same thing.
Right.
Teach it on the map is the first 3 sets are self, right? These are things I'm doing with myself. we'll talk about exercises here in a minute to improve EQ. It has a lot to do with inside first.
Mm.
But then when we show up, right, social persuasion, social awareness, do you teach in your course how to assess, I would say, the emotional stability of an individual? What is it when you, from situational awareness and you're viewing, you come up on a situation, is there an emotional content that you're looking for within the what do I say, suspect?
Subject, suspect. Yeah.
Subject?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, and it kind of, again, it kind of depends on the situation, but I would say 90% of them, you're always going to get that high stress, that kind of like that screaming, yelling. We call it basically venting. They're venting at you. They may be cussing you out. But you just have to realize that's where you have to really know what you're doing is. It's kind of like that pressure valve, like in a steam thing, right? They're kind of, if you just let them keep doing that, you're slowly letting that pressure out, right? So a lot of times people get confused on that and they want to stop them from doing that yelling and screaming, oh, quit yelling at me kind of stuff, right? No, let them, that's where we really talk about that active listening stuff, right? Just let them do that venting, let them get that steam out, and then just again, kind of that self-awareness, just realize that it's not really about you. They can be cussing at you and whatnot, but that you're just the I guess the person there at the time, right? They're just throwing all that at you. It's not personal, but some people can't do that as well. They take that too personal. So you just got to realize that, okay, maybe for the first 30, 40 minutes, that guy's just going to be, volatile off the wall, real high emotions, and that's where you really got to just let that steam come out and then kind of get to the nuts and bolts of, hey, what's going on today? Kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm. Man, I mean, again, just hearing about the job description, the day in the life of it, emotional intelligence to me is just such a, I don't know, I hesitate to say mandatory.
Oh
It's
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you know,
I was going to say 100%. I mean, when I was just looking at a lot of stuff like self-regulation, empathy, man, empathy is one of those things that, we really talk about, in negotiations, you can't fake being empathetic. If you try and fake that stuff, man, you're going to get called out and, people are going to realize that. So and that's not something you can, hey, by the way, I'm going to sprinkle my empathy dust on you. And now you can be empathetic. You can't teach that stuff. Right. So you just got to kind of relate. So how do you relate? So the one I always like to use is always put like, hey, that could be your blank, right? Hey, that could be your brother. That could be your aunt. It could be because I hate to say it, but everybody kind of has that one person in their family that, every now and then I could see him getting that situation, right? But put yourself in those shoes of, man, that could be my brother-in-law. What if he was in the situation, And that kind of gives you that empathy of, oh, I can kind of figure out how this could go about because I could see that playing out kind of thing. So that's the best way we try and, get them in that empathetic view kind of a mode.
Yeah, that's perfect. Again, I call that it was actually a presidential police report study that I did. That we came up with CDMs, critical decision making models. We got a lot of those, and that's one. Again, it's a thought process that shifts me into a different perspective that creates hopefully a different emotional state, and I'm acting a little different. To your point,
Right.
And that was, wow, that could be my cousin, that could be my brother. I love it. I love that.
Right.
I'm thinking again, empathy. That's over there in that we world over there. So empathy, interpretation,
Right.
observation. Observing them, watching their body language. All these. I guess there are 5 in that one, and then you go over here to conflict management, relationship management. It's not like you have a relationship with the person, but
Right. But
by
it's
the
just
time you're done, you want them to you want them to think that they have one, right?
But it goes back to having those social skills, right? So you can't have one of those negotiators that can't interact with people, right? If you have one of those introverts, and one of those things is what we have to do is, well, how do you do that, right? So if I'm doing a negotiator selection, how do I find one of these people? So you got to come up with scenarios to make them do, put them in those situations, see how they interact, and obviously it's not as real world, but at least you're simulating something to see, hey, how's this guy going to react if I got somebody screaming and yelling at him on the other end of the phone, right? So do they have the social skills, life experience? It's something when we do these things, I always look to see how people select negotiators and what kind of scales they use. And I think what's missing is just the life experience. What has this guy done, other than, oh, I went to college, I have a degree, blah, blah, blah. Well, what life experience do you have? I'm looking for that guy who's done a variety of different things. Maybe I've been in the military. Maybe I've studied different foreign languages. I worked in, the service industry, whatever it may be. So look at those different life experiences and how that can help in the negotiation world kind of stuff.
100%. I mean, listening to you talk, Pat, when I put the course together that we've developed, the EQ for Law, we touched a little bit on the 70s, the 1970s personality styles.
Right.
And, I'm sure you got a little bit of that background there. I used a DISC model, but you got two of them that are introverts. Two of them naturally is what we would say. Anyone can learn. Even my introverts can learn how to be interactive and communicate better. But that's that first thing, right? I can relate to you 100%. Putting the right person in the right seat, doing the right thing. You got to be able to have that personality style that can, in a social environment, connect.
Right.
Lack of a better word, 100%. Right. We're working with, again, just all to support, how do you get that qualified applicant before we invest all that time, ammunition, manpower into the academy and that we lose them in the last week, right?
Right.
So we're working with Thomas. He's a commander over there at the Mesa Police Department over in Arizona. And what's crazy is he had the support. I say it's crazy. We want to see it more often. The city council was all on board. Yeah. Mayor was on board. Gov was on board about funding to enhance the program, but more importantly, reduce dropout rate.
Right.
And so we were able, you can't assess them, but we were able to, we took a number of the officers that were, and I don't remember the title, but they were tasked with trying to do exactly what you're talking about. A few questions. What are you looking for? What's the response and the answer? And so we included a fit for duty EQ before.
Right.
So again, just narrowed down some questions, key questions, but the officer was trained now, again, looking through the eyes of EQ, is this somebody that could be a candidate for the academy? It's going to be interesting. They haven't completed the class since implementing it. So
yeah.
Again, just all in the effort of bringing new education, new tools to the trade, man, And I do want to come back. I just triggered because it used to be hostage negotiation, and we changed it at some point.
Right. Yeah. And actually, so it's funny. We were just talking about this. So when we teach,
let's go there first.
So when we teach our class, we do like a little history perspective of how we came about and all this stuff. And obviously, it all started with hostage, right? Because big incidents and these hostage incidents. Well, then we started doing a lot of these situations, and we started realizing, well, we're really not dealing a lot with hostage. It's more crisis, right? Whether it be that emotional crisis or, somebody's in a crisis, that's kind of, so it kind of changed our name to hostage to crisis negotiators. Right. And with that, we kind of changed how we did things too, though, because a lot of the first negotiations was a lot of bargaining stuff, right? Hey, I'll give you a pizza, you give me a hostage, all that kind of stuff, bargain, if you don't do anything for me, I won't do anything for you, kind of a thing. Right. But now that we've learned, through crisis and stuff, a lot of times it's just kind of that, hey, let's do something for them up front to kind of start building that rapport and trust. Hey, Parrish, you've been in there a little while. Would you like a bottle of water? Would you like that bottle of water? And then I give you this bottle of water just out of the blue, and the next thing, hey, Patty's a pretty decent guy. He gave me a bottle of water, right? So that's kind of how we've changed. And it's all just through experience and training and what's worked and what hasn't worked kind of stuff. So
you've been listening to the EQ for Life podcast. To learn more about the EQ for Life podcast or Parrish, please contact us online at info@parishowentaylor.com or call 866-487-2815. That's 866-487-2815.